Hey everybody, welcome to our half-acre homestead. A lot of people always ask, how do you manage to fit chickens and bees and pigs and ducks and goats and a garden and an orchard and all of these things onto a half an acre? And that's exactly what we want to show you today. We really just want to take you on a tour of the entire property and sort of show you where everything is in relation to each other. That way, in case you have maybe a small piece of property like a half an acre or a quarter of an acre, it can give you some ideas on how you can maybe sort of structure your homestead. So first we're going to take you through our orchard, and you know, a lot of people would be surprised like you can have an orchard on just like a half-acre property, but the way we do it is pretty optimal for someone who doesn't have a lot of space but still wants fruit trees. We've got it set up in 3 different rows, and if you look at it, it seems a lot closer than a lot of people would put fruit trees. So in this row right here we have 4 apple trees, and they're spaced about 8 feet apart. But the reason why we can get away with that, like if you look traditionally at apple trees, they're going to be 20 feet tall. Like this would end up shading out any other tree to where it wouldn't really work out well. But the reason it works out for us is because we're going to prune it to about 8 or 9 feet tall. So we're going to let this leader, you know, go ahead and make its way up, and then we're going to prune everything down. That way all the fruit is reachable, because I don't want to get ladders out. I don't want to make it complicated to actually harvest my fruit. And when you do that, you can afford to actually put a lot of trees close together. Like we were just at an apple orchard yesterday, and their trees were significantly closer than this. So as we make our way through the orchard, in this first row right here of 4 trees, they're all apple trees of different varieties. But then coming into the second row, we've got 2 pear trees right here. Now they're going to be different varieties. And then as you continue along right here, we're going to have 2 more apple trees. And then in this third row, we have our 4 peach trees. And like I said, this is a wonderful situation because we have 12 fruit trees in less than 1,000 square feet of space. So when it comes to watering the orchard, we actually have everything set up on a drip line, and we have it set up around all 12 of the trees. So if you look down here under this mulch layer, all I did was drill a hole in just like a standard size hose, and I have it connected to the single spigot we have at the house. And so, you know, every couple of days, especially if we're in the middle of a drought, I'll go ahead and turn it on and make sure everything gets watered down pretty well. But as the trees continue to grow, what we're going to do is we're going to expand the drip line out as far as the furthest branch, because a lot of the feeder roots that actually bring water and nutrients to the tree expand about as far as the branches do go out. So we planted this entire orchard just at about a year ago, so we haven't received really any harvest from it yet, and I doubt that we'll get a ton next year either. You know, we're kind of playing the long game with these. Our best tree right now is actually this Cortland apple. I don't know why this tree, we water everything equally, but this tree is doing phenomenally right now. I need to sort of prune it down a little bit, but as you can see, the idea here is as it continues to grow, we're going to keep it within arm's reach, so that way we can reach all the fruit. So if you have a small property like we do, you have to utilize your front yard. You're not going to just get away with using your backyard. So we're going to walk away from the orchard right now and head toward our garden, which is on the other side of our driveway. Now, a lot of times you're going to be restricted on what you can do in your front yard, especially if you live in an HOA or if the city you have has like specific restrictions on what you're allowed to do. Now, luckily ours does not. We're zoned ag here, and so we're pretty free on what we want to do as long as we stay away from the easement to the road, which we did. And so this brings us to our front yard garden that we actually just built this past spring. So unfortunately right now you're sort of seeing the garden in a little bit of a deserted time of the year. It's October right now. We've got a fall garden going, but all of the summer garden has been pulled out. But I'm going to show you sort of our setup and kind of how we set up our front yard garden. So the way we actually had it set up this year was this first bed was all peppers, and then we had 2 beds of a variety of different tomatoes. And then in these beds down here, we sort of made these in-ground beds out of some 2x4s and some of these blocks that you can get from like Home Depot or Lowe's. This was pretty cost effective. And in this bed, we had carrots this year. And I would say we actually had a fairly successful harvest of carrots. We also had some cabbages that ended up getting absolutely decimated by cabbage worms. In this bed right here, we had onions. We had some cauliflower that didn't do too great, but overall, you know, it wasn't too horrible. And then in this bed down here, we had some melons, we had watermelons and cantaloupe that I would say both did fairly well this year. And then we have our trellis set up. We have a trellis here and then a trellis there. This year on the trellis, you can see the remnants of it. We had some pole beans that we had growing over it, and it did pretty well. We had a great harvest of beans. As you can see, we had so many that we ended up with a bunch of useless ones here, but I should still be able to pull these for seeds for next year actually. But what's super nice about the garden is we were able to do everything in our front yard right outside the front of our house. So it was really quick and easy access to get to everything. And honestly, my favorite part of the garden this whole year was sort of this chaos pollinator garden we put together. My wife just put a variety of different flower seeds in a bucket and then just threw them out in this bed, and it absolutely exploded. Like I said, we're in October, so most everything's dying off. Like all of the sunflowers have died off, but tons of the flowers are doing phenomenally still. And what was amazing about this is we have honeybees, and I'm going to show you that setup later. But those honeybees, even as I'm talking right now, are spending a lot of time gathering pollen even into the fall, which is super beneficial on getting everything set up for the winter. So when it comes to the actual floor of the garden in here, you might think like that's interesting that you just sort of kept it grass, but believe it or not, I didn't at all. We laid a ton of plastic weed barrier down to try to kill everything under it, and then we put a multiple inch layer of mulch there. But what happened was throughout the year, it just got absolutely overran by weeds, and I gave up trying to deal with it. So as you can see, under all the weeds is the mulch. So my sort of plan here is to wait until winter for a lot of these weeds to die off to make it hopefully a little bit easier to pull up. But then next year, I think I'm gonna like triple down on the wood chips to prevent any of those weeds from actually getting through. And the nice thing about having the orchard and the garden fairly close together is it's close to our water source. And so the issue with this house is there is one spigot for the entire house. Now that includes all of our animals, that includes the orchard, that includes the garden. And so we sort of had to come up with I don't even think this is a phenomenal system, but this is the system we came up with to make sure that everything gets watered accordingly. So our one spigot is actually right next to our door, and currently I have it set to go to our animals. This hose is for the drip line for our orchard, and so if I need to water the orchard, I will unhook this and hook up the orchard hose, and then when I want to water the garden, I'll just hook up the garden hose. And so we spend a lot of time coming out here dealing with this. Ideally, I would have a spigot in multiple different locations of the property, but you know, you kind of deal with what you got. And so this is sort of our setup right now. And that brings us to the front porch, which, believe it or not, gets plenty of action. So, you know, we've got 30 something chickens in the backyard, and we don't need 30 something eggs a day for a family of, how many kids do we have? 3, so a family of 5. And so we use our front porch as our egg stand. And so we've got various people that come every single week and pick up eggs. And so we just put them right here in the cooler, and then they can just walk up and pick up the eggs and leave the money in there. And so we, you know, thought this was like a nice, cool, kind of vintage looking Coke cooler. And so that's sort of our egg stand setup. Now, we do have aspirations to do a bit of a larger farm stand in the future, but for now, this is just sort of our egg stand. And so with our ducks being feral, they don't really lay eggs where we want them to. And so the chicken eggs are super nice because you could just walk into the coop, collect the eggs and leave. It's a little bit more of an adventure trying to figure out where the ducks laid, an egg hunt, if you will. And so this is the newest spot we've seen them in. Behind this holly bush right here, we see an entire nest of duck eggs. Now we're lucky that none of them are broody right now, because the reason we went from 3 to about 15 ducks is because we have found broody ducks on nests like that throughout the property over the last year. And of course, there's plenty of ducklings to go around when that happens. So with our ducks being feral, we don't, you know, a lot of people ask, like, where do you keep their water? Where do you feed them and all of this stuff? Now, really, we don't keep any of their water in the backyard. We utilize this side part of our yard that's really wooded and not really useful for much else for the ducks. As you can see, I'll walk through here. They're actually already in there, just kind of running around. And so, you know, the ducks are running away now, but we actually keep their pool sort of tucked back in the woods right here. Now it needs a little bit more water at the moment, but it's kind of nice because you don't really need the most beautiful space for your ducks. And so I really just, you know, homestead 101, use what you have. And so I used a few bricks and a couple of bags of Quickcrete that I left outside. I just took the paper off and used them as stairs for my ducks to make it into their pool. This is in the side yard. The orchard's right there through the wood line. Our house is over here. You can see the garden. And then we're gonna go ahead and transition into the backyard now. So before I get to the backyard, I do wanna talk a little bit about how we utilize this side yard. Like I said, it's kind of like an awkward space and not super usable. So we actually planted multiple blackberries, and before everyone in the Pacific Northwest goes nuts, these are thornless blackberries, so they don't sprawl out quite as aggressively. And so what we're gonna do is, as they continue to grow and these canes go up, we're gonna zip tie them to the fence here and just utilize this entire chain link fence and make it just an entire thornless blackberry grove, so that when my kids are begging us for a bunch of very expensive fruit this summer, I could just sort of tell them to go outside and pick blackberries. So just to help you guys sort of understand the layout, obviously the house is there, I'm standing in the orchard, the garden's over there in the front, and as we make our way toward the back, this is where the ducks were, and this fence right here is where we had the blackberries. And these hollies right here is where you saw that duck nest. And as we make it sort of to the corner of the backyard, this is where most of the actual magic happens. Now this area back here is where my kids play and my dogs play, and various chickens that I haven't clipped yet make their way back here, and Waffles periodically makes his way back here when he busts through the fence. But this is sort of the main area of our homestead that you guys see most often, is right here in the backyard. So as we make our way onto the back porch, this is sort of our main domain here, with our wonderful little mouser Peach keeping an eye on things. This is where all the magic happens. When I come out to do chores, when I come out to do videos, all of our animals are housed back here in the backyard. Now they are broken up into three primary sections between the female goats and the chickens. Then the pigs have their own space, and then our male goats have their own space. So just from the perspective that you have now, our female goats and our chickens live in this space right here through that gate, and Waffles and Franklin, our male goats, live through that gate and that space, and then I'll show you where the pigs live behind the chicken area. So when we first moved here, this was just one big backyard. You'll see the chain link in the back was sort of the boundary of the backyard, but it was completely covered with weeds. And so we added this wooden fence that you see here, broken up into its various sections when we moved in. But beforehand, this did not look anything like it does now when we moved in. It was just completely overgrown, which was one of the main reasons why we got our goats, is we brought them here and they took care of all of the weeds really quickly. So I'm gonna give you guys a tour of the B&R Homestead chicken and female goat area. Now I will say the pigs are back here right now because they broke out, but that's another story for another day. But as you walk in, you're gonna see our goats and our chickens hanging out. We like to keep a nice thick straw bedding on the ground. That way they're not just walking and stepping all over their droppings, because if you know anything about keeping goats and chickens, the last thing they need to be is constantly in contact with their droppings. That could lead to a lot of different illnesses and diseases. And so we like to keep multiple bales of straw on hand. That way everything is nice and clean. But they have a nice big area. We like to free range our chickens. We like to make sure that they have as much sun as they could possibly want. We like to make sure that they can forage for bugs and grubs and whatever they can find back here. Now we do feed them your typical like pelleted feed, but they still get plenty of foraging. As you can see over here, they just like to spend a lot of time outside, hanging out in nature, and I believe living like chickens should. Which brings us to how we house our chickens. Like I said, our chickens are free range, and I like to leave them alone as much as possible, which means we actually give them an automatic chicken coop door right here, which you can time this either by time, you can do it by the lumens outside to where it will automatically open depending on how much light is outside. But I don't have to let our chickens out in the morning. I don't put them away at night. If you don't know anything about chickens, chickens are, they put themselves to bed. You know, they're prey animals, and so they don't want to be out at night, and so they will put themselves into their roost at night. And so this automatic chicken door, if you don't have one, comes in clutch. So our coop, you know, there are 1,000 different ways you can do a chicken coop. We decided to go very simple, and we went to Lowe's and we bought a shed. And they came and they installed it, and we just decided that we would sort of customize the inside to make it a chicken coop. And so this is going to be the B&R Homestead chicken coop. So this coop is 8 by 10, which is perfect for the amount of chickens we have. Now, I would say if your chickens lived primarily in their coop and in a run, they would need a little bit more space, but my chickens only come in here to lay eggs and to sleep at night. They spend the rest of the day outside, so I'm not as concerned about the square footage space with my birds. But as you walk into the coop, it is very simple. The automatic door is right here. They make their way inside, and they have 3 roosting bars. If you don't know anything about chickens, they have a natural pecking order, and so we give them 3 roosting bars to decide where they're going to sleep. And then we also have our nesting boxes right here where they primarily lay their eggs. So you can see we already have a bunch today. And then now that it's coming up on winter, we utilize the deep litter method in here. So the deep litter method is awesome for the winter time, especially if you live in like cold climates where you get pretty bad cold snaps. And so what we do is we simply just layer the bedding on top of the old filthy bedding. And so I actually just did that today. As you can see, it looks super clean, but under this is multiple weeks worth of filth from our chickens. And what's gonna happen is throughout the winter, that filth is going to break down into compost, and when that happens, it actually produces a good bit of heat for your coop. You're gonna wanna start that a few months early. Like I said, we're in October right now, and we really, in North Georgia, don't get super bad cold snaps until like January. And so this is gonna give it multiple months to produce that heat. That way your eggs aren't gonna freeze when you come out here in the winter time. You're not gonna need artificial heat in your coop for your chickens, which can be dangerous depending on what you use. And so we really like to use the deep litter method. We use hemp bedding in our coop. Hemp bedding, it's really wonderful. It is super absorbent when it comes to the droppings, and it's really, really nice to use. It is also fairly dust free, as you can see as well. A lot of your traditional bedding gets incredibly dusty, and it can sort of mess with the chicken's respiratory system, but hemp is awesome. And so that's sort of the inside of our coop. Not super exciting. It's actually pretty standard. Make sure your goats don't make it in because they will eat your nesting pads. And actually, before I go, we have a solar powered exhaust fan at the top part of our coop right here, which actually works super well, especially in the summertime as it gets a little bit filthy in here. If there is any ammonia smell or anything like that, having that ventilation is 1, going to keep it cool, and 2, is going to handle that ammonia pretty well. So when we ordered the shed, we actually wanted to make sure we had plenty of ventilation in here. That's like one of the most important things. And so we do have that exhaust fan that we showed you, but we also have some fixed ventilation in here. So we have one up top, and then as you come down here, we have one down low, because obviously hot air is going to rise, which with the exhaust fan and that fixed vent back here, the hot air is going to exit and the cool air is going to enter through both this vent right here and the automatic coop door, which is just going to keep a nice airflow happening in here so that it doesn't just get stagnant and gross. And so the chicken coop's right here. Behind the chicken coop is where a lot of magic happens. We have both our compost and our honeybees behind the chicken coop. And so as you come around back, apparently we also have 2 large pigs. Now they're supposed to be in their area, but they broke out. But here we have Blossom, and you can see Fern's butt. But these are 2 of our cooney pigs, but they're traditionally not hanging out behind the chicken coop. And you're knocking over our decorations, which I don't appreciate. But behind the coop, you're going to see our compost system. Now this is conveniently right behind the coop, meaning when I do clean out the coop, all I have to do is wheelbarrow it right behind the coop, and I've got my compost bin. This was almost free to make. We have just a couple of T-posts and pallets, and if you see in here, we're allowing our chicken droppings to go ahead and break down into compost for the spring, so that when we amend our garden out front, we're going to have plenty of soil to use. Straight from the homestead, I should say. Right behind the fence, this was the original sort of border of our backyard before we put in the wooden fence. We have our 2 honeybee hives. Now we got those this spring. We got them as nukes. We got 2 of them, And that has been my favorite thing to do all spring and summer long, is to learn a little bit more about honeybees. As you saw earlier, they're all over our garden. They're wonderful pollinators, and hopefully next summer we're going to be able to harvest some honey. Between those two hives, we should get over 100 pounds. We only have to check on them every couple of weeks. They're very low maintenance, and you don't need a ton of space for them. Like I said, I'm standing about 10 feet from the hive right now, and I'm not concerned at all about getting stung. You really don't have to worry about it unless you are right up on the hive and you're messing with it. So once again, I'll sort of show you the order of things around here. We have the bees back here. As you pan over, it's right next to the compost, which is right behind our chicken coop, which sort of sets in the back of our chicken area. Like I said, all of this is just within, you know, less than 100 feet to the house. And so it is all pretty compact, but when you sort of utilize your space well, you don't need as much space as you think. So in this area back here, like I said, it's the chickens and primarily the female goats and our wethers. Now we do have 6 goats in this space. This is the most goats I would have in this space, and we're actually going to be selling 2 of our wethers here soon. But I'm gonna sort of show you what their setup is. Like I said, they live in the same space as the chickens. They do have a house, believe it or not. For some reason they don't use it very much, but it is there for them. It's a solid shelter. I built it myself, but their hay is right here. It's right next to their shelter, but I didn't have any plans for this. I just kind of threw it together. So like I said, we've got the girls' goat house right here. As you walk just a few steps away, sort of jetting off into the woods, we have our pig sanctuary. Now, like I said, it is temporarily vacant because they decided to bust through a portion of the fence. But nonetheless, this is where we house our 2 kune pigs that we have. And it is a lot of space for 2 pigs. Pigs are super simple. They don't need a lot. They want some mud, they want some food, and they want some water. We have a very simple lean-to that we built for them. This took about 30 minutes to put together. They love it. They spend a lot of time in there. And the rest of the space was covered in weeds, and it's actually been super nice because we've been able to clear a decent portion of our forest just by using 2 kune pigs. And so if you're actually interested in clearing some sort of thickets, if there's any woods behind your house, putting some pigs in there will do that very quickly. Now I will say, with our 2 pigs, they are going to be heading to the butcher here in just a couple of weeks. We are not utilizing them as pets. Like, they are going to be feeding our family. So just to sort of show you in relation to everything, like I said, here's our pig area. This is very simple. We just use T-posts and cattle panel. And then through the thicket right here are the bees. And it is on the back side of our chicken area. There's the chicken coop, and she's going to pan around and show you sort of where it is in relation to everything else. But like I said, the pigs, when it comes to like your typical rules of square foot per pig, we have like almost tripled that. Pigs don't need a ton of space. We just like to give our animals more space than what's typically required because we want them to be happy. But especially with our kune-kunes, the reason why we do kune-kunes is because they are great temperamented pigs. They are very family friendly. You could have them as a pet if you wanted to. They're super nice. We got them from a pretty reputable breeder as well. But they also, you know, we've had them for about 10 months now, and they are already grown out to pretty much butcher weight. And so they will be, you know, used for that soon. So as we leave the pig area, we're gonna make our way to really our final space that we're gonna show you today, and that is our male goat area. This is where we house our 2 billy goats, Waffles and Franklin. Now keep in mind it is October, and we are in a full-blown rut right now, and so Waffles is acting moderately psychotic right now. But we're gonna go ahead and make our way into the goat area. We do have a gate right here. We don't use this gate because Waffles has single-handedly busted through everything, and so we had to layer multiple different sections of wire and cattle panel to keep him out of the female goat area. In a different world, we probably would have structured this to where Waffles and his girlfriends were a little bit more than just one small layer of wire apart, but nonetheless, here we are. Okay, this was our first time doing it, but he is in rare form these days, and so let's show you their setup. So we're sitting in the backyard right now where my kids and my dog play. The chicken area and the female goats and the pigs were back here. And as we pan this way is Waffles and Franklin's area. And we're gonna sort of show you the male goat setup. Now they live in luxury, I will say. They're both crazy, so be careful. But we have their playground made out of old school sort of electrical spool. Now for some reason, Franklin, I don't know if he just doesn't know how to jump, but he has never once even attempted to jump up here. Waffles, this is just sort of his domain. He spends most of his day, if he's not making those noises at the female goats, he's up here. Now they live in a fancy schmancy shed right here. This is Casa de Waffles and Franklin. So I'm going to show you sort of how we set up their shed for their purposes. As we come in here, it is a very basic setup. We've got their hay feeder right here. We've got a mineral block for them. We have a couple inch layer of hay on the ground. But what's nice is that this one came with a loft. And so, you know, we go through probably 3 or 4 bales of hay a month between our female goats and our male goats. And what's nice is now we only have to go about once a month because we can store the extra hay bales up there. But it's nice because they have a ton of natural light. They don't spend a ton of time in here, but it is nice to have a quality shelter for them for when it's raining or just when they want to come in and eat. We also have a brush right here for them to be able to scratch their heads if they need to. It's just a nice stiff brush that we have drilled into the wall because as you can see, they really enjoy having their foreheads scratched like this. Franklin's super nice, but this way they can do it themselves if I'm not around. So in the back of their pen is their old goat house. This was the OG goat house that I built last year when we first brought Waffles home. This was just made in a couple of hours, but when we got the shed, we just sort of moved it over here. I guess if like Waffles and Franklin are feuding, they can just sort of separate themselves. But what it has ended up being used for is sort of our feral chickens. They go in here and lay a lot. And actually, I'm going to show you one of our chickens' favorite places to lay right now is in Waffles and Franklin's new house. We have quite a few chickens that were born here on the homestead and for some reason never learned how to live a civil life by like going and sleeping in a coop, so they just live outside. But if you come down here, you can see they love to lay in the corner of Waffles and Franklin's shed. And so this gets to be a part of our egg collecting day, is coming in here every day and risking our life with Waffles. And so as we're leaving this area again, like I said, our backyard's right here. Everything is just a branch of our backyard, which is right behind our house. We can get to sort of any portion of our homestead within like 20 seconds of leaving our back door or our front door. Everything is really compact. And so with the water, if you remember from the beginning, we will connect the hose reel that goes to the chicken water up at the front. And then when you come back here, that hose is connected to this retractable hose reel right here, which is super nice because this gives you, I think it's like 130 feet of space. That way with just this one hose reel, I can fill up the chicken's water, I can fill up the goat's water, I can go back to the pig area and fill up their water, and I can even make my way over to Waffles and Franklin's area to fill up theirs, all with just a single, it's not on, a single hose. And so all of this to say, this is all done in just a little over a half an acre. Now our philosophy here is if we have space, we try to find multiple ways to use that space. And so if you even have a 1/4 acre, you might not be able to have the amount of goats or the amount of chickens that we have, but really with any amount of space you have, you can utilize it in a way that allows you to have a homestead and to pursue self-sufficiency in some way, shape, or form. Now we've only lived on this property for about 1.5 years. And so our goal is over the next couple of years to continually raise the amount of food that we provide ourselves. And so I really think that you can have a situation where you provide a good portion of the food for your family from even just a 1/2 acre homestead. But anyway, that is the tour. I hope you guys enjoyed. I know that you guys have sort of seen different segments and sections of the homestead, but we haven't actually put together an entire tour. So I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any questions, put them in the comments down below. And if you want to help us out, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel and make sure you're following along because we want to continue doing YouTube videos like that. But at the end of the day, thank you so much. We hope you have a great day.